Hello and welcome to the Open Book channel. My name is Ollie, your designated open book. In this video, I wanted to take a quick look at artistic style and how important it is to properly convey a story. That, and talk a little bit about art hacks and techniques and how too much of a good thing can become a bad thing. This topic isn't new by any means, but I ran across an instance recently where the difference between the media style and the content was so jarring that it made me drop its score significantly from what it would have been. The media in question's name is Sleeping Beauties, a graphic novel adaptation of the first co-published novel by Stephen King and Owen King. The adaptation was done by Rio Yours, and the illustrations by Allison Sampson. Now, as a disclaimer and upfront, the problems that I have with Sleeping Beauties are exclusively visual, but that doesn't mean that I'm calling Sampson a bad artist. The thing about this graphic novel is that it is done in a style, or rather, with the method of rotoscope, and this is not a decision that I'm sure the artist made all by themselves. Graphic novels are large projects, and I'm sure that the team behind the adaptation being made in the first place agreed to use rotoscope to style everything. Rotoscope, as a method, tends to be used as a sort of quote-unquote art hack. Rotoscope is to 2D animation as CGI is to 3D films. It is quick and easy, but it's quite noticeable and stands out if it's poorly done. The practice of rotoscoping is to take a photograph and trace over it, which you can do to get a still image like the panels in this graphic novel, or more commonly it's used to quickly 2D animate something by taking frame after frame of a video and using that as the outline reference to easier capture movement. If you want to fully 2D animate somebody doing a jump kick, for example, rotoscoping would be the way easier way than freehanding everything, because you can just trace the outline of a real person performing the action, and you don't have to struggle so much with the flow and proportions of the movement. Anyway, it's not uncommon to start with rotoscope and stylize it, especially if you're making a larger project like animation, or in this case, a graphic novel that requires hundreds and hundreds of panels. Without certain shortcuts, some artistic projects would take decades, so I am in no way criticizing the team behind Sleeping Beauties for utilizing this technique. It is only in the follow-through that things went a little wrong. The thing is that it seems like everything in the graphic novel was drawn in rotoscope, but then it wasn't stylized afterward. Or you could argue that that is of a style, but the point is that it wasn't stylized or hand-tailored enough after the fact to cover up the glaring flaws of rotoscoping images from real faces taken from pictures. In quite a lot of cases, rotoscope creates some uncanny looking stuff if you trace over an image one-to-one and don't make any adjustments. Sometimes, of course, it's fine, but other times if you catch someone halfway between an action and their eye is half closed and their mouth is about to open, it can look really weird. Rotoscoping is such a strong tool for 2D animation because each individual frame doesn't matter in the grand scheme. You're seeing 24 frames a second, as it were. But when you use rotoscope for a singular static image, you need to tweak those off moments to make them make more sense. And in quite a lot of cases, Sleeping Beauties did not. This page of panels I'm about to show is a great example of rotoscope's strengths and weaknesses. In panel 1, we've got two people embracing. Tracing this image has saved the artist a lot of time having to figure out proportions and how their arms wrap around each other, and the lines of the fabric as their clothes pull. Panel 2 is a little awkward, but fine, while panel 3 highlights a strength of rotoscope. Because we're using a picture of a real man's face, it's easy to block in the 3 subtle shades of his skin and stylize a geometrically proportionate face easily by adding in scratchy lines to give it more detail and depth because there isn't a huge gradient from light to dark in this scene. Panel 4 is again a little bit awkward but fine, where things are as they should be proportionately, but the photo they based it off of didn't have very hard shadows, and the act of the woman holding out a blanket has no depth. To fix this, more shading needed to be added to better convey foreground and background than just the hand being larger. And panel 5 is, unfortunately, nightmare fuel. What worked for the man's face in panel 3 does not work here, because they used an image of the woman kind of halfway between talking/smiling, so it's an awkward expression. The lighting isn't hard enough that they added any depth to the face, and therefore they didn't quite understand where to add the scratchy lines, other than where they know the nose ought to be. In some cases throughout Sleeping Beauties, it was just a matter of neglect to make the small tweaks needed to make the static image taken from a moving one make more sense. But overall, what I really wanted to highlight here was how it became apparent that leaning on the practice of rotoscoping just wasn't good enough for Sleeping Beauties because of the story itself. Example 1 I have here is some rats. The rats themselves look fine, but the movement and expression we need from the character isn't there. Does he look terrified or just a little constipated? Does she look like she's unleashing hell in the form of rats, or just kind of awkwardly smiling and holding her hand up? Example 2 that I have, and what's kind of the worst offender, was a scene at a hospital where a man pulls out a gun. The faces unfortunately have no depth and are held together entirely by ragged, scratchy lines, but that just looks strange because the proportions are so anatomically accurate from tracing. But more so than faces, this technique of drawing doesn't capture motion well. The thing about tracing to create 2D animation is great because you don't stop and look at the awkward individual frames that make up every action. A lot of the ones in the middle of a sequence will look just weird. In that, if someone is running, for example, you'll get one frame where their arms and legs are all flailing around like gravity doesn't exist. Or in this case, the image of a man diving forward gets reduced to the stiff static movement when his body is fully airborne, which in and of itself does not convey movement. The artist added a couple of extra squiggles to convey like, oh yeah, he's moving, but it doesn't really fix the problem. In 2D drawing, to convey things like movement and depth, you have to exaggerate things past their regular proportions, and in the case of Sleeping Beauties, not tweaking the rotoscope style after tracing it down became a major hindrance, because they didn't exaggerate things and that took away from the intense action and moments of extreme expression that the graphic novel needed. There were some really cool panels and artistic moments, but keeping consistency and streamlining the rest of the novel with rotoscope really held it back. And all this to say, I just wanted to highlight that the style that you choose to present your work with matters a lot, and that shortcuts in art are great as long as you don't rely on them to the point of letting them hold your story's expression back, which is how I would best describe what happened here in Sleeping Beauties. So let me know in the comments what you think about rotoscoping. Do you ever use it, or do you freehand? Did you know what rotoscoping is before this video, and now you just think that artists are a bunch of cheaters? And for all you writers out there aspiring to make your story into a comic book, was this information helpful to you in making choices about the process of making it? Either, any, and all ways, thank you for watching. If you enjoyed this video, please feel free to like and subscribe, and if you'd like to support me and this channel, I'll have a link to my Ko-fi in the description below. Thanks again, and I'll see you in the next video. Bye!